whatever it is in our life that God's called us to, whether it's a audience of one, whether it's our family, whether it's many, as we step on a stage or a podcast or whatever it may be. What are we doing for the glory of the Lord? And I'll start off today because I have this moment in my life that I want to share with you guys that I got a little bit of, I'll say a whipping, but it came off a great moment for me. I shared with y'all, I think last week or the week before, that I'd gone up on this mountain expedition with Tamara's husband, Gary, and some guys. And in that moment, I get to the top. And as the air gets thinner, we're at about just shy of 14,000 feet. And I realized then, although I already knew this, but I just had to be reminded of this, I wasn't physically prepared like I should have been. But I don't know that you can ever be really physically prepared for that because Gary found that out real quick when he was wearing shorts and we got stuck in a snowstorm and he almost got hypothermic on us. So all the things we think we're prepared and then we find out we're not really quick, especially when you're stretched beyond that moment. But I realized when I was up there and as I was walking down and just kind of processing what had occurred, when I got to that top part and the guys were walking ahead of me and I was slowing down and I'd have to take a breath to really watch the nauseous feelings. I know Tamara's sick today, that nauseous feeling that was creeping up. You take a breath and then I would get maybe 2 or 3 steps before I'd have to stop and take another breath. And at that point, I'm like, you know what? I've made it much further than I thought I should have or probably should have. Mentally prepared, I'll push myself to the limits and do things, but physically I was starting to feel the struggle. And I told the guys, I was like, I can see the top. You guys go on without me. I'll be walking at my own pace. If I don't make it, I don't make it. When y'all turn around, then you can catch me on the way back down. And all of them were like, no, we're not going to let you quit. You continue to walk at your pace. Take your breaths. We'll walk at ours, but you're going to get to the top. You're not going to get this close and be done. So as I was walking down, and we did end up making the top because a snowstorm blew in an hour earlier. It got real white real quick. We couldn't see anything. And Natalie's husband, Steve, was guiding us. He's a Navy SEAL. And he said, you know what? We probably shouldn't go any further. And when a Navy SEAL tells you probably shouldn't go any further, that's the guy I'm listening to. So we turned around and started heading back down. So I processed a lot of this down the way and all along the week. And what came to me was when you have the right people in your circle, you'll go further than you will go by yourself. So I brought that back and I've really been chewing on that because in our church, for those of you that don't know, I came into a broken situation, a very old-minded church had been founded 30 years ago and had been kind of stuck in its ways and almost plateaued and gone down a little bit in size and all the things. And for those of you that don't know, in the season that we did the house church, it was really God undoing some things in Morgan and I, Tamara and Gary, really stretching us to what church should be. So I came in with this new mentality, free of a lot of the traditional stuff I grew up in. I grew up very traditional Pentecost, oneness even, and God walked me through this journey through oneness, to Trinitarian. Then he connected me with people with Baptist and Methodist. And along the way, what I began to discern is the fruit of people and not define them by the gifts that they have, which is exactly what Jesus said. You'll know them by their fruit. And I think in our denominations and our churches, we've been known by our gifts. That's what divides us in a lot of places when you get into the weeds of what is and what isn't. So God really allowed me to interact with people along the way. And in this church, I'm getting to a point that's going to affect business, I promise. But I have to give you the backstory because that's just who I am. I'm a storyteller. I'm sorry, but that's just who I am. So God brought me into this place, founded Baptist. This boy founded Pentecost. We meet in the middle, and I realized God did that undoing season so that he could have us in a passionate pursuit of him as a church, that we would be open to people of all denominations to come in, connect, and divert their trajectory towards him, not just off what they had known or what they'd been told. And really, when you pursue him, you'll discern what you've been told is right and what you've been told is good and what you've been told that's just flat out wrong. Like, that's the purpose of getting in the word and knowing him more, is to discern the difference. So now coming down off this mountain, I'm like, you know what? I've had a lot of stress in my life as a pastor because there's a lot of things that we need to change and move in this church. And it's like it's like the biggest elephant and you got to eat it. And it's hard because when you begin to look at the big elephant and I'm never going to eat all this. How do you do it? They always say 1 bite at a time, right? I didn't even know which bite to start with because there were so many things, and everybody's got, they don't come to me and say this, but when you're taking in the filter of everybody, you can get bogged down real quick in what is the first step. So I come back and I say, you know what? I can't do this alone. I'll sit in my office week to week and I'll be frustrated that we're not moving because I'm trying to do everything. And so I got our spiritual leaders together and I was like, you know what? I have to tell them this. And I told him this, and Sherry was like, you know, it's up on a mountain and all the things I just told you. And I realized I can't do this by myself. And one of my spiritual leaders looked across the table from me and he said, you know, I just feel like you don't trust us. And it was mind blowing to me because in that moment, I realized what the problem was. I was carrying all this thing because of my vision, because of what I saw needed to get done. But I had never trusted the people around me to help me carry this. And it really connected because I preached a sermon on Sunday. I've been talking about altered living, and there's moments throughout the Bible where there was a moment like in Abraham, we know, when he made the altar and almost sacrificed Isaac, and God stayed his hand and gave him the ram. And he said, in that moment, you are now called Jehovah Jireh, the Lord that provides, on that day. And that moment on, for the rest of us that read the Bible and understand Christianity and see Jesus, that's who Jesus is. He is the Lord that provides. And many of us go through that struggle, especially as entrepreneurs, to trust him in that area. It is an altar that we have to lay ourselves at. But then the second altar moment I found was Moses. So if you've read the Bible, you know Moses, they've just made it to the Red Sea. They're in the wilderness and they get to their first battle. And there's somebody that appears out of nowhere to fight them. And God says, Moses, go up on this mountain, send Joshua down to fight with an army that's nowhere near what the other army is. I need you to go up on the mountain and hold your hands up. And as long as your staff is raised, you'll win this battle. And he goes up there, and Aaron and Hur come up with him. And there's times where he gets tired, so they put a stone under him to sit down. They hold his arms up, and eventually they win this battle. And Moses builds this altar. And he said, in this place, you will now be known as the Lord is my banner, or Jehovah Nissi. And I begin to process that because what Moses was saying is, Moses is not your banner. Moses' staff is not your guide. The Lord is your banner. And then you process that with the children of Israel. What were they being led by every day? The fire at night and the cloud by day. That was their banner, because in war, in old war especially, you had this one kid that his only job was to carry a flag around. And he really had to trust that everybody behind him believed in that flag and was going to follow him in the battle. Otherwise, his little butt was going to get out there with a flag with nobody behind him, and he was going to be gone real quick. Like, he didn't have a gun, he didn't have the training. He was just brought along to carry a flag. So in that case, the banner they followed. And in the wilderness, they followed the banner. So in that case, they could see when the leader got off track. Moses could have took a hard right. And if they were following the smoke and the fire, then they would have said, hey, Moses, that's the direction. But there was some that would follow Moses probably off the path because they trusted him and they didn't know where to look.